Hi, welcome back. On this episode, we're going to change the rad on the Suzuki Sidekick. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification button, and check me out on Instagram at Clargo Garage. Let's get started. Alright, so I've already started draining the fluid out of the old rad, and I've loosened off the clutch fan so it's ready to come off. And that's as far as I got before I started recording. This is the replacement rad, and this Sidekick is a 94, and the rad that was in it went a few years ago, and I had a parts 97 kicking around with a pretty ripe looking rad, and I threw that in it at the time, and I got about another 3 or 4 years out of it. And the top part up here split on this one, so I ended up having to get a new one. When I went to go get a new one, for the 94, they couldn't give me a estimated time of arrival. It was indefinitely, so I didn't know if I was going to get it in a couple weeks or a couple months. So I ended up getting one for 97, and on their system it didn't show them being compatible, but I already knew from putting the one from the 97 in before that they are compatible. So if you've had that issue, or if you're having that issue finding a rad, the 97 rad will fit. This Sidekick was originally a manual transmission, the 5-speed with the 1.6 liter, and the rad that I put in from the 97 was it was a 4-door as well, and it had the 1.6 liter, but it was an automatic. So the automatic rad for a 97 will for sure fit in a manual 4-door of a 94 if you do run into that issue. So looking at the rad, this is the front of the rad facing the air, and then this is the back of the rad. So you got to reuse your old rad cap, so you got to keep that. And then this is where your coolant lines will go on. And then these lines down here, these are for your transmission lines, which we're not going to be using, so we're just going to leave them capped off, and that'll be good enough because we're not worried with that. But if you have a automatic, you need to make sure that you do your transmission lines. And then these bolts here are where the fan shroud bolts on. And you need to, it's easier if you take the rad out with the fan shroud and then put the fan shroud on the new rad before slipping it back in. And then this bolt right here, it has a little clip on it for the clutch cable. So you got to, easiest way would be to just take that bolt out down below, or take the clutch cable out and pull it all up in one unit. And then this guy right here is your drain, and there's a little drain off on the bottom, but there's a structure underneath here. So what I ended up doing, this is a bigger hose than what I used, but I slipped a hose on there and then opened this up so it would drain directly into my catch pan. I'm going to put new fluid in. I'm not going to reuse any of the old fluid, so I just use my dirty oil pan to catch it. Because this has been leaking for a while, and I've just been dumping water in it just because I've been using it for plowing, and I've been too busy to get around and change the rad. And I keep it in a heated garage, so I wasn't worried about things freezing because it's always in a heated garage in the wintertime for snow plowing. But if you are going to reuse your old fluid, if you think it's new enough or it looks really good and you decide you want to reuse it, make sure you use a clean container to catch it. And then it's not a bad idea when you dump it back in to have a strainer to make sure if there's any debris in it that it filters it out. Alright, so we're going to crawl underneath and I'll show you what I got going on down there. And then we'll continue up top with removing the rad. Alright, so as you can kind of see, right here is that line that I have coming off of the drain. And you can see that the stuff for the automatic lines aren't used. And then that guy right there, that's just a 10 mil. We're going to pop that off. And we'll just leave that bracket right on that cable. And then we just got to put the bolt back on when we put the new one in. So there's not too much to do down here. And right over there you can see the hose clamp. That's the lower rad hose. So we got to loosen that off too and pull that line off. And then we can pull the rad out. Everything on the bottom will be disconnected at that point, and we'll be good to go. So we're going to go back up top, and then we'll start working up there. Alright, so we have the lower rad hose off now. We got that bracket for the clutch cable off as well. So everything down below should be ready to pull up. We just got the up top stuff to do. And then one other thing, if you are an automatic, you gotta take those transmission lines off too before you can pull it up. And then when you put it back together, you have to make sure that you recheck your transmission fluid level, and you'll probably have to add a little bit of fluid back in for whatever was in the lines that ran out and whatever was in the rad. So I already got the rad cap off. I took that off when I started draining to help everything flow out. I have the clutch fan loose. There's 4 bolts holding it on. So I'm going to take the clutch fan out now. You can take it out now, or you can take it out once you get this upper rad hose off. And it is probably actually a little bit easier to take it off once you have the upper rad hose off. But we're going to take it off now. It's already loose. I have it ready to go. So we'll do that next. So I just had 1 nut left on it there, already loosened off. I got the other 4 off already. And then it just slips out. I had trouble getting mine off. So I had to actually take a chisel and a hammer, and I put the chisel there and just slightly tapped and just kept spinning it, and then I was able to pop it off. And then so you have 4 studs that go through here and stick out this way, and then you have your nuts that would be sitting there. And when you try to take those off, it's most likely going to spin, and you're not going to be able to get them to break free. So this shaft is kind of a square shape. So I took a 24 millimeter wrench, and it slipped straight on. So then you're able to turn it, and then just keep turning it wherever you need it. And you hold that wrench, and then you have your other wrench, your 10 millimeter on there, and you're able to break it free. I end up linking 2 wrenches together to get a little more leverage. So that's how I took the clutch fan off. And when I said I used 2 wrenches, I had the box end on the nut, and then I take the box end of typically a bigger wrench, and you slip it on like that, and then you get a lot more leverage if you're having trouble getting them off. So that's a handy little trick. So now with our fan out of the way, we'll take this upper rad hose off the rad, but I'm also going to take the thermostat housing out too, just because I want to make sure that there's no dirt or debris in there. And I'm probably going to try to pressurize the system a little bit to try to blow anything out of the motor, get all that old antifreeze out best I can. I'll just try to make the hole smaller with a rag and then a little bit of compressed air, and hopefully it will just flush everything out. So I have hose clamps on here, they're just 5/16, and then the bolts on the thermostat housing are 12 mil. So we'll take these guys off first. And I typically double hose clamp my rad lines. I've had the hose clamps blow off before, or I've had the hoses blow off. So I've started double clamping all my lines just to be safe. It's no fun when you're playing around, you're hitting the high revs and you blow a line. It's kind of annoying. There's that, and then we'll take the thermostat housing off now so that hose is completely out of our way. But you don't need to do that. There's that. There's really not much to it. I'm going to leave the thermostat in there for now just to keep any dirt or anything out. And I'm going to put the bolts back in the holes that they came from. I'll end up throwing a paper towel or a rag or something over there to help keep things clean. And then on the right beside where the rad cap goes is your overflow line. So we gotta pull the hose clamp off. You can use pliers. This one is a little bit weak, so I'm able to just use my hand. And then I should be able to, there we go, pull the line right off too. And then I've already fully drained the reservoir as well when I was waiting for the fluid to change or to drain out of the rod. And the reservoir is pretty easy. You just pop the lines off, like so, the cap, and then you just shake and pull up and it comes right out. Because all that's holding it on is just these grooves right there. There's nothing holding it on, so I flushed it out. There's some gunk and stuff in the bottom. So I just flushed it with a garden hose, put my hand on top and shook it, and did that a few times, and then I put it back in place. And it just slips back in, and then you slip your lines on. We'll top that up once we're putting things back together and putting fluid in. So now with all that done, last thing that's going to hold us up, on the top of the rod on the two corners, there's two bolts. They're just 10 millimeter. So we'll grab our 10 mil socket and we can take those out. Now we should be able to carefully just pick it straight up and it should come right out of there. There should be two rubbers on the bottom of this that we're going to have to reuse. And those rubbers, they just go on the bottom of these two studs. So we're going to have to reuse those rubbers. So make sure you don't lose them or throw them out. And just straight up like so. And then we're out. Alright, so these are our two rods side by side. So we're going to take this fan shroud off and we'll put it onto this one. And I should mention the part number on this. On the sheet it actually says this for 98 Chevrolet Tracker. It's the same thing as like the 97 Suzuki Sidekick, and it fits in the 94 Suzuki Sidekick. For the part number, there's a 4-1590, and then it also has MFG, I'm not sure what that stands for, 288, and then there's a space from that, and then it's CU 1864. So between those three numbers, hopefully you're able to find the same rod if you need it. And I paid just a little bit over $260 before tax. So with tax, it was just under 300 bucks. So it wasn't the cheapest thing, but you need it, you need it. So there's 4 bolts on this. I'm missing one. I think it was rusted off, and that's why it never made it back in. So I think I got some spare bolts kicking around that will fit this. I have some metric stuff. So we're going to use our 10 mil, and we're going to loosen it off, hopefully. Yeah, it's coming. So there's that, and then it's just going to slip right on, like so. And then we'll be able to put our new bolts in, but I'm going to clean it up before I actually bolt it on. And then down on the bottom here, we need to take our rubbers off. So there's one rubber, the other rubber stuck to the frame, so we're going to have to pull that off. You just take it and then you just slide it on, and it is shaped like this. So as you can see, there's a bit of a step on it. So the bigger portion goes up on the rod, and then the smaller portion will fit in a pocket down below to keep it in place. So just keep that in mind, that the smaller side goes down, bigger side goes up. So looking down here, you can see this hole here and this hole right here. Those are the 2 holes that those bottom rubber mounts slip into to hold the bottom of the rad in place. So when you're putting it back in, you got to make sure that you line it up with those. And then you probably have to do just a bit of a push to get it to slip in. And then that'll be that. And this is a good time to check everything else out, make sure there's no major rust or anything that looks bad. There's going to be another video that's going to be I'm going to make at the same time. I'm going to change these both belts, but they're in order. They should be in tomorrow, so I won't be finishing this job for at least a day or so. Alright, so the next time we see this thing, we're going to have the fan shroud and everything cleaned up, and we're going to be ready to put it all back together. There'll be new belts on it. So I'm going to stop recording here and fiddle with my other stuff and start recording the other video. Alright, we're ready to get the rad back in. I got everything all cleaned up. I got my new belts on. I'm good to start putting everything back together. I did put a little bit of never sees where the rubbers go, just so it'll be a little bit easier to see where the rubbers are supposed to go in. Be a little bit easier with the camera. And then they shouldn't get stuck there hopefully next time either. It'll hopefully stop any rust that has started. You can see the 2 silver spots, that's where those rubber footings go. So it's kind of all ready. And then here's those rubber feet on the rad. I got the shroud already on. I'm going to pull this lower cap off right now. I'm going to keep the upper one on, but I'm going to keep the I'm going to take the lower one off now just because it's easier to get to than when I'm underneath. And I'm going to make sure that the drain is tight. So now we just got to slip it in, get these 2 feet into the pockets there for them, and everything else should line up nice. Alright, so I had to do a little bit of modifying on the top of this rad. So right here is where our pieces slip on, where the bolt goes through. And I measured out the old rad. Everything's the same except for this height here was a little bit different. So I had to file it down a bit. It used to be right there, the part going across, so I filed it down about a 1/4 inch or better. And then there's this little piece in here. That was a real pain. I ended up using a Dremel to knock that down so the piece would slide in. So I would suspect that if you had this rad, even if it was going to 97, you'd probably have to do a little filing, because that rad that was in this 94 was from a 97 and it fits in perfect. So I had to do that. So that added about an extra hour or so to this job just with playing around with it. I think I got it good now, so we're going to slip it in and hopefully bolt it in and we can continue on. So we need to take these from the old rad. They have our welded nut on the back, and we got to reuse them. And we're going to put a little bit of never sees on our bolts too. Alright, the rad's all bolted down, it's nice and secure. And now we can start doing our stuff down below. We'll do our lower rad hose first so we don't forget. And we'll re-put that bracket back on for the clutch cable. Alright, the lower rad hose is on now, and now we're going to put the clutch fan back on. So we're just going to carefully slip this in, and we're going to make sure that these fins don't go in and hit the rad, because we don't want to damage it at all. take our little nuts and one at a time we'll put them on. Alright, now that our fan is installed, that should be it for our hardware. If you have any hardware left over, you're missing something somewhere. But there's not too much for hardware. You have your 2 bolts on the top of the rod. You have your 1 bolt down for the clutch cable. And then you got 4 nuts for the fan. And that should be it. Alright, we're going to put our upper rod hose back on. This is our thermostat, if you're ever curious what it looked like. So this is the side that faces up. That's what the bottom looks like. And then you have this little guy here that'll let a little bit of fluid pass through, but not very much. So as the engine's warming up, it's not letting the fluid out of the engine. So it's just circulating inside of the engine. And then once the engine gets up to temperature, this spring setup will open up, allowing all the fluid to pass through the rod as well. So then it'll be circulating the engine and getting fresh, cool fluid from the radiator. So that's how that works if you're ever curious. I wanted to check it out, just make sure it wasn't gummed up or anything like that. Since I was this far into it, it looks good. Inside the engine looks good too. That just looks like this. That's what that looks like. It just sits there. Everything looks nice and clean in there. I'm pretty happy with that. So we're just going to throw it back in. And when you put it on, you want to make sure that the thermostat's sitting in right. I've seen where the thermostat's not quite in right, or it gets a little bit cockeyed and you go to start tightening down, you don't realize it, and it will actually snap these ears off. So you always got to be careful of that. It'll probably be easier if we slip it right onto the rod at the same time, so we'll take that rod cap off too. And just slip this right on. That'll probably make it line up real easy and stay in place real easy for us. Yeah. And we're going to put a little bit of never seeds on these bolts as well. Alright, now we're putting our hose clamps back on. And I like to do 2 hose clamps since I've had rod hoses blow off before at higher RPM. So that's just kind of a little thing that I do. But I like to try to keep the clamps opposite to each other. I think they clamp a little bit better. So we'll do one up first and then we'll do the other one. There's one clamp. You can kind of squeeze and feel the end of the part coming out of the rod is. And you want to make sure that your clamps are before that. You don't want to be clamping there because it's going to cause more strain on the hose. And it will cause more strain when you're clamping down, and it could possibly break the plastic since it's just plastic coming out. Should really give a bit of a pull, and it shouldn't want to move at all. If it feels like it wants to move, you need to do a little more tightening, but you don't want to over tighten. So that's how those hose clamps look. So they're opposite to each other. And then when I squeeze, the end of the rod neck is right about there. So we have about 1/4 inch before the end of that. So the 2 hose clamps fit on good. So that's great. And now we can put our overflow spout back on. That just slips on like so. And then I was able to just use my hands to squeeze the factory clamp. You might need to use a pair of pliers maybe. So that's good now. So we're all set up there. So our next step is to dump fluid in. And then once we dump fluid in, we'll be able to start it up and let the fluid cycle. And then we should be good to go. Then we'll check it in a day or two after driving, just in case there's any trapped air bubbles or anything. So we're gonna take this plastic protector off the top, and now we can dump our fluid in. So I'm not dumping anything special in. This stuff's good for most stuff. The fluid I had in here before was for GM. From the last time I had the rad off, I just used what I had laying around, which was GM stuff. So I'm going to put GM stuff back in it. So this is the 50/50. Usually when I do a rad change, usually I'll buy a jug or two of 50/50 and then fill it almost all the way up with that. And then I'll usually add just a little bit of concentrated. But when I went to go buy more, they didn't have any concentrated there. So I got all 50/50. So hopefully it's a good ratio up here. We do get some minus 40 Celsius weather. So we always need to make sure that up in my area that we're good for minus 40 or so, just so we don't have to worry about if a vehicle's outside and the engine cracking or anything like that from the antifreeze freezing. So we're going to start dumping this in. And if you hold the jug sideways, it should pour out nice. And also keep in mind that antifreeze is pretty sweet, and animals really like the smell and the taste of it, but it's also very poisonous. So if you have any pets or your neighbors have pets and you're doing this outside or somewhere your pets can get to, it's very poisonous to animals and children or anyone that consumes it. So be very cautious of that. So that's one jug, and it's sitting right at the top of the rad. You can see the fluids right at the top of the rad, so we're going to dump some in the reservoir now too, and then we're going to fire it up and start letting it circulate. So that should be good for now. So if you had any small leaks, you should start to notice them. So far we're looking good. So you can kind of squeeze on the upper rad hose, and that will help to pull some of the fluid in. But we're going to just fire it up. We're going to let the water pump start circulating, and that should make sure the engine's full. And our rad level should drop a bit. We should have to fill it up. And we're going to leave the cap off while we do this. When you, if you ever have a hot engine and you go to take your radiator cap off while it's still hot, it's very dangerous and you can get 3rd-degree burns. So you never want to do that. You want to let your engine cool. And even then, when you think it's cool, squeeze the rad hose. And if there's a lot of pressure in it, wait longer. If it's pretty soft, throw a towel over just to be safe and carefully do it, because I think it gets up around 10 or 15 psi in there of scalding hot 100+ degree water, and it's not a good situation. Alright, I'm going to end this video here. We dumped a little more fluid in, and it should be pretty good now. I overfilled the reservoir about half an inch or an inch. Once I get out driving and the fluid circulates more and get a little more RPM for time, and if there's any air bubbles, they're going to work out. And I'm assuming it's going to need to suck some fluid from the reservoir. So I overfilled it just a bit to hopefully compensate for that. And I'll I'll drive it for a week or so. I don't drive it that often, so roughly like 50 to 100 kilometers, and then I'll double check it again, and then I'll probably check it one more time after that, just whenever I think about it and get some more mileage on it. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification button. Have a great day.